The Patina'd podcast is about the earned wisdom bound in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd podcast.
Pretty much overnight, I went from owning my own Jiu-Jitsu academy, competing professionally in Jiu-Jitsu, doing CrossFit for strength and conditioning for it 5 days a week, and doing trail ultramarathons for fun on the side, to pretty much bedridden, like in the blink of an eye. Everything changed really, really quick. I think some people will look at it that 2 years into this, I go do this race and like, wow, are you getting better? And it's like, I'm not better. I'm just choosing to do stuff in spite of it. But then there's also the part of just not allowing others, doctors or whoever, to dictate what is or isn't possible for you. You know, like, I don't believe we can, if we put limitations on ourselves, how can we find out what we're truly capable of? Like, we have no idea. Just because somebody else hasn't done it before doesn't mean somebody can't. I think many other people in my position would just automatically assume that that's not possible, that I can't go run 50 miles over the course of a 24-hour race. I mean, it doesn't, medically or mathematically or anything, it doesn't make sense. But I was able to do that.
Like I mentioned to you, this is something I'm doing for my own personal interest, but personally, I am very much attracted to this theme of resiliency, and as a result, just becoming a better version of yourself, right? And it feels like within the foundations of everything that I can see when it comes to mental health, optimization, physical health, there seems to be this common thread, even spiritually. There seems to be a common thread of doing hard things, going through suffering, and as a result, becoming better on the other end. And so I am here with my second guest, Lindsey Boston. That name is interesting to me because I think in the 4th grade, I had a girlfriend named Lindsey Boston, which was not you. She broke my heart after about 3 hours. So it was a rough one. I had to grow in that experience too. Just kidding. But yeah, I don't even know how to intro you, Lindsey. Typically, podcast hosts have this great intro of this person does this person does this person has done all these things. And you have done a lot of things too. But I can't think of a great intro for you other than, okay, Lindsey Boston is a beast that will rip your arm off and then pray for healing afterwards as she tries to repair it for you. So yeah, I don't know. That was probably a terrible intro, Lindsey, but welcome to the Patina'd podcast.
Thank you. It was fine. It was perfect.
So the first question I'd like to start off with, Lindsey, is what is pain to you?
I mean, it's so many things. It's such a broad thing, from like physical to emotional, mental, and spiritual. It's like that resistance that goes against us in so many ways. And real, true pain is something that you have to be able to mentally burden if you're going to survive it. I think there's the mental overrides everything when it comes to pain.
I don't know you personally. How I come in contact with you was I was out doing my first 100 miler, and it wasn't until recently where I started running and taking on this endurance journey. And so I was out there doing my first 100 miler. And one of the great things about ultras is you can be a beginner, you can be kind of like a middle of the pack person, or you can be a legend in the sport and you happen to be on the same race day, then you're running with the same people on that race day. So that's pretty cool. That race that we shared together, there were 2 legends in the sport of ultra running that day. And there's also a gentleman that was out there, an 81-year-old gentleman that was out there, that Todd Lee, I think was his name, that was out there. So some pretty inspirational stuff. But you're also in there with a myriad of other people who are out there just trying to challenge themselves and be the best version of themselves that day. And you happen to be one of the people. As I was going across the course, seeing you push yourself and challenge yourself was inspiring to witness lap after lap, just seeing you do that. So that's how I first kind of came in contact with you, Lindsey, was seeing you out there push yourself. So can we get a little bit of your story and your background?
Yeah. So I had a lot of health issues pretty much from the time I was born, some of which we knew what they were, some of which we didn't, some of which were misdiagnosed, so weren't properly treated. But I was a very active kid too. And I was always really able to push past these physical things. And then I ended up in a car accident that was really bad. And it kind of catapulted a lot of things. So a lot of the conditions that I already had that either were undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, they worsened exponentially to where I couldn't work through them anymore. And then also some new conditions were brought on as a result. Pretty much overnight, I went from owning my own Jiu-Jitsu academy, competing professionally in Jiu-Jitsu, doing CrossFit for strength and conditioning for it 5 days a week, and doing trail ultramarathons for fun on the side, to pretty much bedridden, like in the blink of an eye. Everything changed really, really quick. And it took us not too long to get to the right people that could sort out the answers. So probably about 4 months after my accident, I made my way back east and got into a clinic where I was able to stay for 2 weeks and go through a whole battery of tests and kind of get everything unpacked. But a lot of those things, they are not curable. They're chronic. And unfortunately, with the severity of my case, there's not a lot of hope in their eyes for me to get back to being like functional. Pretty much like this was kind of my life now. And it was just unfortunate. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. He said I was a ticking time bomb. I had all this stuff that wasn't being treated properly. And as a result, it pushed it beyond a point of hope. So, but we started treatments. I was going back and forth across the country for treatments. I got a whole army of great doctors. I went under several pretty massive surgeries. I had one just back in January where essentially I gave myself a kidney transplant for one of the conditions I have, where my renal vein was compressed in multiple locations from other organs in my aorta. So they had to take out my kidney, clean up all the scarring, clean up a bunch of nerves, transplant it back into my pelvis, lower than where it was, so that couldn't happen again. And at that time, they were regrafting veins lower as well that were compressed. I mean, I had several really major surgeries this year as a result. And then, I'm sure as you saw in the thing, I have to use a walker because I get very symptomatic. I get very dizzy when I'm upright, lots of nausea, vomiting. I pass out. From the conditions that I have some very severe autonomic failure. And so my body doesn't regulate anything that it's supposed to regulate that we don't think about, like heart rate, blood pressure, blood sugar, temperature regulation, sweating, pupil dilation. I mean, just a whole array of things. So my body doesn't respond right like it used to. You exercise and your heart rate's appropriate for your workload and whatever. So that's why I have to use the walker. And that's why I had to take a lot of breaks and sit out, because sometimes my symptoms would just get so severe that, I couldn't push through them. I mean, I think some people will look at it that 2 years into this, I go do this race and wow, are you getting better? And it's I'm not better. I'm just choosing to do stuff in spite of it. I've given into it for years. I've done all the right things. I did all the resting. I honor my body, and this is a part of me. It's something that I love, and that ultra being a loop race gives me an opportunity to get back in touch with the part of my life that was taking from me from when I got so sick, because I can do it safely. So yeah, you always have someone with me. That's my pacer. They allow me to have a safety pacer the whole time in case a serious medical thing arises during, which it did several times. So it was good I had those people to help me get back to the trailer. And, you can stop and go as much as you want. And it didn't really matter to me if I did 5 miles or 50 miles. I just wanted to get to experience it.
Yeah. For people out there who may be listening that have some very unique, rare thing going on, and they don't know of many other people out there going through that, and they happen to search on YouTube and they happen to come across this interview and they say, wow, this person happens to have this very unique thing that I also have. What are some of the things that you have going on that you've been diagnosed with?
There's a whole bunch, but we'll hit some of them. And again, some of them I knew before, some of them came about after. So I have severe sympathetic failure. Okay. And with that, I have severe cardiovagal failure, adrenergic failure. I have POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. I have Ehlers Danlos syndrome, which is kind of where the ticking time bomb comes, because it's a connective tissue disorder and my ligaments don't hold things appropriately. So the accident, I ended up with cervical cranial instability, and that partially paralyzed my vagus nerve and damaged my autonomic nervous system. I have a condition called mast cell activation syndrome. So I get anaphylaxis really easy off of everyday ordinary things that really aren't harmful to our bodies, or even just like temperature or emotion, sense. A lot of things can set that off. And then I have a lot of really rare vascular compressions. So that's kind of what I was talking about with those surgeries. Is I had a condition called median arcuate ligament syndrome and Nutcracker syndrome, Thurner syndrome, and pelvic congestion syndrome. And then I have really chronic hypovolemia, which is a low blood volume, which is why I have the port, and I do a lot of medications and fluids through that all day, every day, to expand my blood volume and also help my body with the hydration, because I have a kidney condition called Gittleman's syndrome, where my body doesn't process electrolytes properly. So my kidney does not process electrolytes right. So no matter how much I would take in orally of electrolytes and fluids, I would essentially always be dehydrated. And then I have a paralysis of my stomach called gastroparesis. And there's a lot. Addisons disease. There's a lot, and a lot of them are rare or less heard of conditions, which is why I was not diagnosed or misdiagnosed for so long. I actually was diagnosed with lupus for about 15 years, even though all my labs didn't align, but a couple labs did. And my mom has it, and I had all of the symptoms. So when they weren't finding other things, they assumed that had to be it. So, but I didn't. Actually, that was the rashes, the flushing, the everything. That was the mast cell, and all of the body pain was the Ehlers Danlos syndrome. So, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, that's so much. So my son, he has a very unique medical condition. The fact that he's still alive is a miracle. He's a walking, talking miracle. As a result of his main condition, he has kidney disease. And so you mentioned you basically had your own kidney transplant because they took out your kidney. They did a bunch of work on trying to repair some of the damage done to it, put it back in. How is that going? Because again, with a son with kidney disease, that seems interesting and something I should know about. So other listeners probably do not care whatsoever, but how does that happen? How can they take out a kidney? Because typically you're just on a wait list for somebody else to give you a kidney.
Yeah. So my kidney health was still good enough that my kidney is viable. So the damage that was happening to my kidney was secondary to the compression of the renal vein And then also my second compression was up at the ilium, whatever. So that renal vein was being compressed, and that was causing all of the symptoms, like severe back pain, blood in the urine, and then my had where I would get that. I can't ever remember the name, but essentially my kidney would swell. It's called hydro something. But the main problem with my kidney was that it just wasn't getting adequate blood flow. It couldn't, because the renal vein was compressed in two places. So it still had health. There was a lot of scarring with the kidney. So they took it out and cleaned up all the scarring and then put it on ice while they finished doing other things inside of me. They had to remove like my ovarian vein, my renal lumbar vein, and my adrenal vein because they were so grossly enlarged from the backflow and the reflux. And then I had a bunch of tributary and collateral veins that they had to clean out as well. And then they do a denervation. So they strip off all these damaged nerves with the kidney as well. So that's where all the pain is coming from. And then they were able to retransplant it lower. And as soon as it was transplanted, it pinked right up and started producing urine and was good. So it's a little bit different than a kidney transplant for kidney failure. Like, they did it to save my kidney, because those were my two choices, was the auto transplant. My kidney health is good enough, but it's not good enough for a donor nephrectomy. So the other choice was to just take my kidney out and it would just go in the trash because it couldn't go to another person, but it's good enough for me, And actually my kidney function has improved quite a bit since then. My GFR used to run around 50, 52, and now it runs around 90. So
wow, that's something hopeful that I didn't expect to hear tonight. And then it's kind of weird to me. It's like when you said it's not good enough for somebody else, but it's good enough for you. It almost makes me think about, in a weird way, how like restaurants will throw out food that's like perfectly good, right? But it's like, it's just not good for. But you would think with the lack of kidney donors and that sort of thing, you would think that they would just take something that would be good enough, At least if I was desperate enough, I would take something that was just good enough. So sports, athletic endeavors, if you look at it from a bird's eye view, you can look at it in a cynical way and say, it's just sports. Like, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Like, someone like yourself, with all the reasons in the world to do exactly what is prescribed to you, which is rest and chill out and, as you said, honor your body. And then for you, you said, on the other hand, I have to honor who I am and go and challenge myself through athletic achievement. So why is it through athletic achievement where you want to try to honor yourself?
Yeah, so there's a couple of parts to it. And when it comes to running specifically, for me, being out on the trails and stuff, I mean, it's a connection for me with God. I can connect with God at home and worship, music, and prayer, all those things. But there's something really special about being out on the trails and running. Like when I'm doing jiu-jitsu, all I can think about is jiu-jitsu. There's a therapeutic side for that, right? Like you're having a really bad day or whatever, you're dealing with this mess. This is all I can think about, right? I can't think about anything else. But with running, there's nothing for me to think about. I can just be out there and be at peace, or I can pray, or I can have conversations with God. I can think nothing. I can just enjoy the scenery. It's a really deep connection for me being out there. But then there's also the part of just not allowing others, doctors or whoever, to dictate what is or isn't possible for you. Like I don't believe we can, if we put limitations on ourselves, how can we find out what we're truly capable of? Like we have no idea. Just because somebody else hasn't done it before doesn't mean somebody can't. And I know a big thing for me too is, if, like how I said, doing it in spite is still feeling awful, right? I'm not better, but I did it in spite of that. it's part that I get to make that choice. I still have choice in my life and I get to make decisions. I mean, I understand that I come from a different background and I'm really good at disassociating from my body, from what I'm physically feeling, because you can't be a professional athlete unless you know how to do that. And so for me to be able to go out and right in the first quarter mile be feeling things that anybody else would say, this doesn't feel good, this doesn't feel right, I shouldn't be doing this, and stop. I can just kind of try to do it in spite of that and connect with what I am doing and not focus on, I'm not sitting there thinking about it the whole time. Like, I feel like I'm going to throw up. I'm dizzy. I'm this, I'm that, I'm trying to enjoy the moment of what I'm doing and kind of block that stuff out. And I understand that my background allows me to have that skill built up to do it. It's not something that I just learned. It's just doing it in a new situation.
You said you've been dealing with medical things your entire life, essentially. Did your parents have anything to do with the woman you are today and the high resilience or the high level of resilience that you have, the capacity to, as you said, to kind of compartmentalize the physical pain and actually focus in on the goal? How did your parents handle that? What was that situation like?
I mean, it was fine. I think that they always took things serious when they needed to be, but they never also tried to shelter me. They never tried to hold me back from doing things because of health stuff. And I mean, I started running when I was 13 because I actually ended up in the hospital. I was 13. I was a girl. I was dramatic. I thought I was having a heart attack. I was having all this chest pain. I was having a heart attack and I knew I was dying and no one could tell me otherwise. So they take me to the hospital. Cardiology comes in. All this stuff is happening. And I had a really bad asthma attack is what happened. And my mom had asked, because you always hear people saying like, oh, I can't run or I can't do this or I can't do that. I have asthma. It's a lot of things people say. My mom asked the doctors about that. Like, she's a pretty active kid. Does this mean she can't do these things anymore? And they said, no, she should. It will help strengthen her lungs and there's training you can do. So I signed up for cross country at the school and they supported me in that. So I think that they did play a strong role in not making excuses with it or holding me back from doing things with it. And even as an adult, when I fell so ill a couple of years ago, they have been nothing but supportive and encouraging, and not caring about what other people's viewpoints might be on what I'm trying to push my body to do and the complications that it causes. I mean, I pay for it. Every time I do it, I pay for it. And, but they know it's a part of me and they know I love it. And so they just encourage me and they've always been that way.
So you start in your teenage years doing things, joining the cross country team, getting athletic. At what point do you begin to take on jiu-jitsu? Like, what does your timeline look like?
Yeah. So I graduated when I was 17 and I got married at 18. And then we had our first kid at 20, the first one at 19, the second at 20, and the third at 23. And so, yeah, we got married young. It moved really fast. We didn't hold back. And then when my daughter was 5, so I was 24, she was diagnosed with celiac disease. And there was this group that was running a marathon and using it as a fundraiser. So I was like, I could run a half marathon. Sure, why not? And I signed up for the Rock and Roll Phoenix and I raised a bunch of money for celiac disease. And that was my first half marathon. And then I did it again the next year. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. I actually was running so much, I broke my foot in like 4 places. I had all these stress fractures. And so they ended up, once I was able to start getting out running again, my doctor told me, no roads yet, just trail, soft sand, whatever. So that's when I started trail running. And I never ran on road again after that because I was like, look at what I've been missing all this time. Like, why wasn't I always trail running? So I did that for a long time. And then I'd actually tore my Achilles when I was about 33. And when I was recovering from that was when I started Jiu-Jitsu. So I started Jiu-Jitsu at 34. I was doing some PT with a personal trainer, just doing some stuff while I couldn't do stuff with my Achilles injury. And then a Jiu-Jitsu studio was opening up. And it was right at the time I was getting released to be able to do whatever. And so I went ahead and I joined. I tried it before. I tried it a few years before, but I had only tried it a couple times. And I actually ended up getting a really bad spinal injury from a not so great training partner. So I didn't really ever think I would do it again, but I trusted this person and I really did like it the few times I did it. So I wanted to start. And my kids started with me. So we all did it together. I was training Jiu-Jitsu in Roseville. I live in Reno, but I was driving back and forth. I would drive there, train a couple of classes, stay overnight, train a couple of classes, drive home for 2 nights, and then drive back. I did that a couple times a week to get my training in and stuff. And that was right after things were reopening from COVID. And then we decided like the right move would be for me to go ahead and open up my own Jiu-Jitsu school. It was something I wanted to do for a long time, and the timing was right. The black belt over Aries, Samir, he gave me the thumbs up and was very encouraging to open up an academy in Reno. And so I did that. And for 8 months, it was really wonderful. I loved it. And then my accident happened and we tried really hard to hang on to it. But, my son ran it for over a year for me. And it was just too much stress to have to worry about and think about. Even if I wasn't there running classes and that was covered, I was still thinking about my students and the business and the right things for everybody involved. And so then in December of 2022, we closed the doors. Yeah.
Okay. And this is, I guess, probably goes with that theme of while challenging yourself and still trying to be the person that you want to be, still honoring yourself and kind of setting boundaries for yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I had to face the reality of what I was dealing with too. When I was first diagnosed, everybody's hopeful. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm flying across the country. I'm spending 2 weeks at this facility. They're going to figure me all out. I get this miracle treatment. I'm going to have my life back. And I had to quickly learn like that wasn't the case. When it took a long time of grief, a lot of grief, but then to be able to come to accept. And it's not like the illnesses don't have to become my identity, but I can learn to live alongside of them and I can learn how to navigate and know when to do things and when to pull back, when the cost is worth it. Like the race, the cost was worth it. It's something I can't do all the time. It's like a once a year thing for me, but it's something I can do. I have to plan very meticulously and I can't train like normal ultra runners can train or like I used to train for ultras. I can't do that. My body just doesn't have the capacity. And there's only so much that mental power and strength can do for you. There's only so much. It can get you through a lot, but only so much. I had to learn about if I want to go run on Thursday night at 6, if I want to go hike and run or do whatever, then I already know what Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are going to look for me. Like how much I have to rest and how much I have to be on top of my meds, not miss a single thing, try not to get overstressed or over emotional about anything. So like my training for the ultra was getting out once a week on the trails, whether it was 3 miles or 10 miles or whatever it was just, that's what I get. And, it's not ideal, because I had to think a lot about ligaments and things like that. It's not just getting the training miles in on your feet, but strengthening the muscles and the ligaments and everything else like that, not wanting to cross the line of where we're pushing it. And then there's that line of risk. I mean, ultimately, that's why during the race, I went and stopped for 5 hours because I'm like, I've been pushing and pushing. I don't want to cross that line where they're hauling me to the hospital. And so Nobody knows themselves better than themselves. And I think the more we can get in tune with ourselves and know our bodies, then the better we can play along that line. Because I know I'm mentally strong enough, I could be stupid and push past the line. That's not what we want. It's riding a very fine line. And the better you know yourself and your body, then the more you can do that. And it allows you opportunities. It allows you opportunities where there weren't before. I think many other people in my position would just automatically assume that that's not possible, that I can't go run 50 miles over the course of a 24-hour race. I mean, it doesn't medically or mathematically or anything, it doesn't make sense. But I was able to do that because just taking the time to really understand my body and know where the lines are.
Yeah. What are the things that get you to commit to something like that, or keep you consistent in your commitment to something like that?
I think for me, like the big thing is about finishing what I set out to do, even if it looks different than what I hoped for. So when there's something that is important to me that I want to do it, that's what makes it easy for me to stay on task, is just how much it means for me. And for somebody else, that's not going to be a race. It might be somebody that's very ill and they want to attend a kid's graduation in a different state or go on a vacation and stuff like that. Because even that was it for me. It's crazy. Like I couldn't imagine going on an actual vacation with my medical stuff. But then it was like, as I was able to do that race, I wasn't as afraid anymore to try to go pursue something like that. So it's going to look a little bit different for everybody. But I mean, when it's that important to you, you just learn where to draw those lines. There was a lot of times where we would just go out for time, not miles, and just go out for time on feet. And I always have a nice crew of people with me. But every time, once we started getting into more hours, like 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever, I always fell short. Like something medically would come up that we would just have to call it. Something would happen. And so it was like the 4 hour wasn't 4 hours. It was 3 hours and the 5 was 4. And it just wasn't. And there was one night where I was finally like, I'm pushing through no matter what happens, because this is 6 hours and I have to push through 6 hours because I want to push through 24. And so I just was like, have all my medical stuff laid out. Like if this happens, this is what we use. And I ended up doing 22 miles in that 6 hours. We got it done. And it was like this light bulb went off, like on the way home when my son was driving me home, where I was just like, wow. And I don't ever get in awe of myself, but in that moment, I was just so proud of the resilience and strength that I had. I was like 2 days ago, I passed out, fainted, getting up to go to the bathroom. And now I just ran and walked 22 miles with my friends in the dark, And so the race was another big moment like that, just to have that reflection of your resilience. Like in your head, you think like, I'm strong, I can do this, I know I can power through. But when you actually do it and you get on the other side, it's just the fact that I actually did. I mean, I had no idea I would do 54 miles. Like it wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't trying to place. I wasn't trying to win it. There was just a lot of positive self-reflection coming out the other side. And the people that were there with me, like the amount of love that I have for them, because I had a whole crew there just for me, supporting me. Everybody had their own jobs. Like my friend, she's a nurse. I was wearing a 24-hour EKG monitoring thing that she was able to check on, and she was able to do up all my medications, and people trying to feed me or just talk to me mentally through things. Just everybody getting together in a group like that. And to me, that's kind of what ultra running is just all those people that come together for like a common goal and just support and help each other, even if they're also doing the race or the event. And I really love that camaraderie that comes with ultra running. It's just a very special thing for me, that race in particular,
Yeah. Seeing you out there personally with the walker, like, you have an assumption as to why the walker is important, right? For lack of balance or something. But your walker has the seat on it. I didn't realize that was probably something extremely important as you discussed blood pressure issues and how you get dizzy and just faint randomly. What is it like for your husband to see you doing this, or for your children to see you doing this?
It's really empowering for them. So my husband especially, I mean, my kids, they're always super proud and they love seeing me out there. But even if I would just go coach a jiu-jitsu class, or even go drill at an open mat, or do this race or whatever it might be, it's very encouraging for him. I think it was a huge lifestyle change. I was a very active person before, and I was never home. I mean, we were always on the go, always doing things. So I think it's very special to him when he can see me out doing this kind of stuff and kind of just get a glimpse of me that's still in there. He's always telling me like how strong I am and stuff like that. And he would watch me on Strava when I would go out and do my training runs. He always, when it would start, he'd always say like, I see you. And then, he'll say, good job, or you're almost done, or whatever it is, or if there's not any movement for a couple minutes, he'll, are you okay? Like, are you okay? It's like, yeah, I just need to sit for a minute. So
he's really on it. He's like,
he's on it.
Checking Strava.
He's on it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I hope I can show my kids, a certain kind of strength that maybe they didn't think was possible. And I don't know when in their lives they'll need that, but they will. And so I just hope I can be an example of that for them.
Yeah. My fear is that people are going to listen to guests on this podcast and think, oh, they're different. They're different because they just have something different in their genes that makes them an obsessive person, or makes them a person that won't be stopped. And I don't have that gene. That's something that I hope with this podcast that I can begin to break through and say, no, that's actually not the case. The everyman or the every woman can be this type of person, So for the person that is listening and thinking, okay, I have a myriad of different ailments maybe going on than Lindsey, but for her, she's different because she's just an athlete. She has something different than me. And so I can't get up and go after it in the same way that she does. What would be your input for them?
Well, but I am like them. That is me. Like, I don't actually have any natural athletic giftings. I really don't. It's just been consistency over the years. That's really all it's been, is just starting small and building up. Like, I ran cross country in high school and stuff, but I also had a few babies before I did any type of running again. And that's actually one of the things that drew me to jiu-jitsu so much, was it was a sport that did not, like, attributes don't matter in jiu-jitsu. It's like they're all secondary to everything else. It's all mat time. So it doesn't matter if somebody's bigger, faster, more athletic, more flexible, whatever. That's just the person that's consistent and going and going and going. They're the ones that are going to get good fast. It's that consistency. And it's the same way with the running. I started small and I just consistently worked my way up over the years. I'm just the same as them. It's just about consistency. And I had a guy with me there. We weren't out on the track very much together, but I did help him get through all his training. And I don't know if you saw him, but his name is Randall, and he's 72 years old. And I actually personal trained him for about 5 years. He's never done anything like this. He's never done anything like that. He did his military mile run when he was in the military 50 years ago. And he really wanted to do something like that. And I encouraged him that, like, if you don't do it, you'll never know, And so we just started getting him out training, and we started with some walking and then some jogging and increasing mileage and time. And it was over the course of 5 months, but he went out there, and even with the knee injury, he was able to do 32 miles, I think is what he got, 31 or 32 miles. And that was his first running race. 71 years old. He had never ran more than 1 mile in his whole life before we started this. When he went out and did it, I just think if there's something you're interested and you want to do, like, don't count yourself out. Like, the people with just raw natural talent, they're far and few between. It's really people that can be consistent. Like, if you want to do something, start small, gradually work up, be consistent. The only person that can keep anybody from doing something is themselves. If you tell yourself you can't, then you're probably right. But if you want to do something, you just start. I never thought after 8 years of doing jiu-jitsu, I would be a black belt. I had like no athletic abilities, and I'm tiny. I figured I would just spend most of my mat years getting smashed. And in 7 years of it, having like new, big, huge, strong guys come in, and they can't do anything to you. They can't handle you. And all that I did that was special of any sort was show up. That's it.
I kind of mentioned this question earlier, but I just want to try to maybe rehash it. But why athletics? Like, do you have a theory as to why we're driven as people to use something, again, from a bird's eye view, is almost like what are you doing? Like, do you know what it is, or do you have a theory as to why through athletics we were so driven to do it through that format?
I mean, I think part of the thing is just there's not a lot of other things that push the physical pain like athletics do, that you have to push through and work through. It's just you build a different type of resilience with it when you could be feeling so much pain in your body and everything's saying to stop, and you're able to like push through and just keep going. It just builds a different type of resilience and mental strength, and finding out what you really can do and what you're capable of. I mean, the endorphins are great too, but it's just different. There's really nothing else that pushes you in that physical pain to where you have to build mental toughness.
Yeah. So I think here's an example of how athletics can kind of infiltrate normal life misery. Because you said this to me in our message exchange, that you had a surgery the day before the race.
Yeah, I did.
So I would say it's that consistency you talked about of doing hard things and showing up, getting the time in on the mat, getting the time in on the trails, all those sort of things. There's got to be something that has pushed you. There's a term called window of tolerance in psychology, but essentially it's like your capacity for resiliency. And so you've done all these things, and I don't know if you're knowing this during the process or you're doing it intentionally through the process of trying to become more resilient and more resilient as a person. But when you get to the point to where you're training hard for a race, and then you have a surgery that I imagine was scheduled, and you're looking at the dates and you're like, I think we can make it work. I think we can do it. I think I can do the surgery, and the next day go through it, and you remove the excuses and you just do what you committed to. I would imagine that there's years of consistency that built up that tool for you.
Definitely. There is. And I know I wouldn't say like just athletics and stuff too, but I mean, I did deal with a lot of trauma in my teens and early 20 years. I did have some pretty traumatic events that I had to work through. And like I said, jiu-jitsu was nice in that you don't think about those things. But running was nice because it also allows you to escape through those things. So I think it is easy to look at things and have an excuse to not do certain things, but I'm more looking at how do I work around this? we'd been planning on this race. I really wanted to do it last year, and I just physically couldn't, and I just knew it wasn't a good idea. I had a very major surgery in Connecticut that July, and I had found out that I then had to go in January and get the other surgeries. So last year, just I knew it couldn't happen, but I was like, next year I'm doing it. So there wasn't any way I was letting it get in the way, anything get in the way of me doing this race. And it was only the week prior to the race that they scheduled this surgery. And it was something I wanted to push out, but they said it needed to be done urgently. So I just said, okay, how do we have to reevaluate things? What do we need to do? And I mean, I was high as a kite on anesthesia. My friend was driving us to our hotel in Roseville. We just got up the next day and did it anyways. So I wasn't able to eat. I have a lot of problems with eating as is, and then it was just majorly exasperated. So fluid and food intake during the race was definitely one of the biggest challenges.
Golly, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I wasn't able to eat for pretty much the entire race, and my fluid intake was pretty poor. And I actually had blood in my urine for a little while, and my team was just about to pull me and tell me I had to quit when finally that resolved. But yeah, not being able to eat. Yeah, that was pretty rough on an ultra.
Yeah, they say ultras are essentially an eating competition, is what they say. So
The
not
best
being
part.
able to eat is brutal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty rough. Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. So, like me, the night before, I'm like, okay, looking at my different things. How's my headlights? How's this? How's this? You're co-managing with the other person that's going to be out there. Okay, so we got this escape plan. We got this med management stuff. We got this potential thing. All the stuff you had to do to put it together to make that night happen, including all the people that you had, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, and I have a lot of amazing people in my life. So I'm really grateful that, without them, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I'm really just grateful for all of them. They all had their own role, and there was a lot of moving parts for sure, but it all came together, and we're going to do it all again next year.
I love what you said. Jiu-jitsu helps you to stop thinking about those things when you're talking about trauma. Mm-hmm. But running allows you to escape through those things. So jiu-jitsu allows you to not think about those things, but running allows you to escape through those things. I love that. So it is common. What happens is if you're somebody of faith, which I think most humans are, it just depends on what their faith is toward. But if you're somebody of faith and you derive hope through that faith, and then all of a sudden you get in a car crash, and then boom, this diagnosis comes, boom, this diagnosis comes, boom, this diagnosis comes, and it's one after the other after the other. I would imagine that faith can be shook in that time. At least it would make sense if it was, where it's almost like, why me, God? Or like, where are you in this hour? I need you. I prayed for help and I got another diagnosis. How was that for you in terms of your faith?
Yeah, I think people go one or two ways when tragedies happen, right? Some people do get angry at God or pull away. For me, I was on the other side of things where I had really strong faith already, and my experiences strengthened my faith and my relationship with God even more. The doctors are limited in what they can do, and there is no cures for most of the things that I have. So all of my hope is in God, and I know that he's more powerful and able to do more things than any doctor on this planet. But I also know that he's using me through it. Like, I do not believe that God put these things on me. We just live in a world that these things happen, but he is allowing me to walk through it, and he will use it for good. I do believe that. And for me, it really did strengthen my faith even more. And I know it seems bizarre to most people how it works that way, but it's just been a really big thing of me not allowing it to like be my identity. And with how much my life slowed down, how much more time it allowed me to spend with God and in the Word. And when negative thoughts like that would come into my mind, I would just go back to the scripture and reiterate the truth of God's goodness and of his promises. I spent a lot of time in the book of Job for a while there, like repetitively just going through things. He did nothing to deserve any of the sufferings that he went through. And even though he forsaked even being born, he never turned away from God. That faith never shook. And God didn't just restore him. He restored him back in a multitude. And so I do believe that I don't understand why I'm going through everything I'm going through. And I don't know if I'll ever know it Earthside, but I do believe that it is being used for good, even if I can't see what that is, or even if I never know while I'm here on Earth what that is. Yeah.
I feel like that's a good place to end. That's a good message right there. Do you want to mention the Instagram handle?
Yeah, the Instagram handle is unbreakable_spirit and then 2 underscores.
Right on. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to have had you on this podcast episode. I think if it wasn't for my son saying, I want to be on the podcast, and me having him be the first guest on the podcast, you would have been the first guest, because I can't imagine somebody carrying the spirit of what this podcast is supposed to be more than you. So yeah, I really appreciate having you on, and that's all I'm going to say. I don't have a way to end these podcasts yet, so it's just going to awkwardly fade out.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links. The intro music was 2 in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slim's on Blue Dot Sessions.